If you knew you had only hours to live, what would your last words be? Would they be angry, bitter, a desperate plea for more time, or would they reveal something deeper about who you actually are? 2,000 years ago, a man did know. He knew exactly how much time he had left, and what he said in those final hours still echoes today. His name was Jesus, and he was not in a hospital bed with morphine and family around him. Not surrounded by comfort, but on a Roman execution device, outside a city that had rejected him, in front of a crowd that mocked him. The temperature was climbing toward noon. The sun was relentless, and his body was breaking down slowly, deliberately, cruelly. Roman crucifixion was not fast. The historian Josephus, who watched this punishment unfold in his own time, described it as torture that could last 12, sometimes 24 hours. The victim would suffocate slowly as their own weight crushed their lungs. They would die of thirst. They would die of shock. But they would die slowly. That was the point. Jesus hung on that cross for 6 hours, from 9 in the morning until 3 in the afternoon. In that time, he spoke 7 times, not prayers, not declarations of theology, but words, raw, human words spoken in the midst of unimaginable pain. And here's what most people miss. Those 7 words are not a sermon. They're not a teaching. They're a window into the soul of a dying man. And through that window, you see everything you need to know about who he was, who he is. So let me ask you something. Have you ever paid attention to the last words someone you loved spoke before they died? Have you held onto those words, turned them over in your mind, tried to extract every drop of meaning from them? Most of us have. We do this because final words matter. They cut through all the noise, all the performance, all the careful management of how we want people to see us. And if that's true, if dying reveals who we really are, then Jesus' words on the cross reveal everything. There were 7. Let me walk you through each one, and as you listen, ask yourself this. What kind of person says these things while dying? What does that tell you about him? Stay with me. The soldiers nailed him to the wood. Then they did what soldiers do. They divided his garment. This wasn't cruelty for its own sake. It was standard procedure. A crucified man's possessions went to the execution squad. So they sat at the base of the cross and cast lots. They gambled with dice to see who would get what. Above them, suspended in agony, was the man whose clothes they were stealing. And in that moment, while his blood was fresh on the wood, while his body was still in the first waves of shock, while soldiers were literally dividing his clothes beneath his dying eyes, Jesus spoke, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." Stop there. That word, forgive, it's not a small word. In Greek, it's aphianai. It doesn't mean excuse. It doesn't mean overlook. It means to release completely, to let go, to absolve. And who is he forgiving? Not his followers, not his friends, the people murdering him, the soldiers driving nails, the crowd screaming for his blood, the religious leaders who orchestrated his arrest. Forgive them. Think about that for a moment. You're in the worst pain imaginable. You're dying. Every breath is a battle. And your first instinct is not to curse, not to demand justice, not to say, "I will make you pay for this." Your first instinct is to forgive. That's not normal. That's not even human, in the way we usually understand humanity. That's something else entirely. You've probably been wronged by someone, maybe recently, maybe it still stings. And you know that feeling, the desire for payback, for them to understand what they did. For consequences. It's natural, it's human. But Jesus, hanging there broken and bleeding, doesn't feel that way. He feels compassion. For the people actively killing him, this is the first word, forgiveness. Not from a position of weakness, from a position of absolute strength. Because forgiveness, true forgiveness, only comes from someone who could punish, but chooses not to. That's what you see in the first word. Not a victim. A victor. The second word, redemption today. Two criminals hung beside him. This was the custom. Crucifixion was public. It was meant to be a spectacle, a warning. This is what happens if you cross Rome. One of these criminals, like everyone else, mocked Jesus. If you're the Messiah, save yourself. Save us. But the other criminal, let's call him what the early church called him, Dismas. Dismas looked at Jesus and saw something different. Maybe it was the way Jesus hung there without cursing. Maybe it was the forgiveness he'd just heard. Maybe it was something in the man's face, but Dismas recognized something true about who Jesus was, and he said, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." That's a remarkable confession from a dying man. Dismas had been alive for maybe 30 or 40 years. He'd lived however he wanted. He'd stolen. He'd hurt people. He'd earned his place on that cross. And now he's dying. Really dying. Genuinely dying. And he looks at a stranger being executed next to him and says, "Remember me." He's asking for grace, for mercy, for a second chance, from someone who has no power to give him anything, and Jesus answers him, "Today you will be with me in paradise." Not tomorrow. Not after purgatory or purification or any other process. Not eventually. When you've paid your debt. Today, the Greek word is semeron. It means this very day, this moment. Now Dismas was a criminal. He was a sinner. He had hours left to live, and in those final hours, he reached out to Jesus, and redemption was immediate, complete. No waiting, no asterisks, no fine print. Do you know what that means? It means that however far you've gone, however much you've messed up, however late you think you are, redemption is not a process you have to earn. It's not something you have to work toward. It's something that's available to you today, right now, in this moment, if you ask. That's the second word, paradise. Not delayed, not conditional, available now. Standing beneath the cross, not running away, not hiding, but standing there in public where everyone could see, was Mary, his mother. By this point, Mary had endured things no parent should endure. She'd held her newborn son and been told by an old prophet, "A sword will pierce your own soul too." She'd watched her boy grow into a teacher. She'd heard the crowds turn on him. She'd seen him arrested. And now she was watching him die. With her stood John, the disciple Jesus loved. The young man who had leaned against Jesus's chest at dinner and heard his heartbeat, who had run to the tomb when Jesus rose. John was there, faithful, watching, and Jesus, hanging in agony, looked down. He looked at his mother, then at John, and he said, "Woman, here is your son. Son, here is your mother." Notice he didn't call her mother. He called her woman, Jin, in Greek. Not cold, not distant, but respectful. Honoring, he was assigning his mother's care to John. He was saying, "After I'm gone, he will be your family, your protection, your home." Even broken and bleeding and suffocating on a cross, Jesus was taking care of his mother. This is the thing we often miss about love. Love is not what you say. Love is what you do. Love is showing up. Love is taking responsibility. Love is looking at someone you treasure and making sure they're okay, no matter what you're going through. In the worst moment of his life, Jesus wasn't absorbed in his own pain. He was thinking about his mother, about her future, about her loneliness, about her need for family, and he fixed it. He loved her with an action, not a sentiment. That's the third word, in some sense, family, protection, responsibility. Love that shows up even when you're breaking apart. And then something changed. The Gospels are very specific about this. All four writers record it. From noon until 3 in the afternoon, darkness came over the whole land. Not clouds, not a storm. Darkness, an unnatural darkness. The sun, which had been bearing down, relentless and cruel, went out, and in that darkness, this is not a gentle prayer. The Greek word is krazo. It means to cry out loudly, to wail, to shout. And what he shouted was, my God, why have you forsaken me? In Aramaic, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani. This is the opening line of Psalm 22. A song about suffering. A song about abandonment. And when Jesus cried these words, he was opening a conversation with Scripture itself. He was saying, I know this psalm, I've prayed it, and now I'm living it. But here's what's strange. Jesus doesn't call God Father. He calls him God. It's the only moment in the Gospels where Jesus distances himself like this, and the cry itself. It's a question, it's almost an accusation. Why have you abandoned me? Now, here's what theologians have wrestled with for 2,000 years. Did God actually abandon Jesus? Or did Jesus feel abandoned? The Gospels don't answer that directly, but they tell us this. Jesus experienced a feeling of being utterly alone, utterly cut off from the presence of his Father. This is the deepest darkness. Not physical pain, that's already happening, but spiritual pain. The sense that the one who sustains everything, the one he called Father, has vanished. And you know what? Many of you have felt this way. You've prayed and heard silence. You've been in pain and felt like God was gone. You've cried out, maybe not aloud, but in the secret place of your heart. Why have you abandoned me? And you thought you were alone in that feeling. But Jesus felt it too. The one who created the cosmos felt it. The one who knew no sin felt it. The one who was most connected to the Father felt it. Which means when you're in that place of feeling utterly abandoned, utterly alone, you're not outside the experience of God, you're inside it. You're in the same place Jesus was. That's the fourth word, the question itself. The cry that seems to come from nowhere. The fifth word, thirst. And yet, even in that darkness, the physical body kept its demands. Jesus said, I am thirsty. Not a theological statement, not a metaphor, a literal, bodily need. The human body doesn't stop needing water, just because the mind is in anguish. If anything, the combination is worse. Crucifixion causes massive blood loss. It causes the body to shut down gradually, and the brain, the lungs, the heart, they all cry out for fluid. So when Jesus said, I thirst, he was telling you that his mouth was dry, his lips were cracked, his throat felt like sandpaper. He was really suffering. In his body. Not just his spirit, and the soldiers, hearing this, offered him sour wine, what they called pasca. It was cheap, acidic, bitter, the common drink of Roman soldiers. It would not have quenched his thirst. It would have made it worse. But Jesus took it. Here's what John tells us. He writes that Jesus said this, to fulfill Scripture. The Psalm said, they put poison in my food, and gave me vinegar to drink. And John is making a point. Nothing about this is accidental. Jesus is consciously living out these ancient words. But that doesn't make it less real. That doesn't make the thirst less genuine. This is the only word Jesus speaks about himself. Everything before this has been about others. Forgiveness for the soldiers, paradise for the thief, care for his mother, connection with his Father. But this one, I am thirsty. It's personal, it's his pain, his need, his suffering. And it tells you that he wasn't a ghost floating above this experience. He wasn't having a spiritual moment while his body suffered separately. He was fully there, fully human, fully experiencing what it means to be broken and dying. Which means when you suffer, when your body hurts, when your life is painful, when you're in distress, you're not suffering outside the experience of God. God knows what that feels like. He's been there. The sixth word, finished. This is a word that appears in business documents, on receipts, when you paid a debt completely, when you finished a project entirely, when a transaction was concluded with no balance remaining, you wrote to Telestai, "It is complete, it is done." Jesus wasn't gasping these words, he wasn't whimpering, he was declaring. This is a statement of conclusion, of accomplishment, of work completed. Not "I am dying," but "the work is done." Think about what that means. For 3 years, Jesus had walked the earth teaching. For 40 days in the wilderness, he'd resisted temptation. Every moment of his life had been moving toward this one thing. Not toward a defeat, toward a completion. And in that moment, hanging on that cross, he could say, truthfully, absolutely, finally, "It is finished." Everything the Old Testament pointed toward, every sacrifice, every prophecy, every shadowy hint of redemption, all of it was complete, all of it was done, all of it was paid for. The debt was settled, the work was finished. There was nothing left to do, nothing left to add, nothing left to earn, which is what changes everything, isn't it? Because we live in a world of incompleteness. We're always working towards something. We're always striving. We're always trying to do enough, be enough, accomplish enough. We live in debt, spiritual debt, relational debt, financial debt. We live as if there's always one more thing we need to do to finally be okay. And Jesus, dying, broken, finished, says, "No, it's done. You don't need to finish it, it's already complete." The 7th word, trust. And finally, the last word. "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit." Notice what changed. In the 4th word, Jesus had called God God, distant, abandoned. But here, in the final word, he calls him Father. He's come home, the sense of distance has dissolved. And the word commit, it's paratithemi in Greek. It means to place something into someone's hands, to entrust completely. Not, "I hope my Father will take care of me." Not, "I'm not sure, but I'm trying anyway." But complete, absolute trust. Into your hands I place myself, completely, entirely. But it's not the surrender of someone who's been defeated. It's the surrender of someone who has finished the race, who knows the end is just, who trusts the one he's trusting completely. Jesus had endured 3 hours of darkness. He'd felt abandoned. He'd experienced the deepest loneliness imaginable. And yet here, in the final moment, he doesn't say, "I don't understand." He doesn't say, "I'm still confused." He says, "I trust you." That's extraordinary. After everything, after the darkness, after the abandonment, after the physical agony, his final word is trust. This is not optimism. This is not positive thinking. This is not pretending things are better than they are. This is a man who has looked directly into the face of suffering, loneliness, abandonment, and chosen trust anyway, and then he died, not violently. The Gospel says he bowed his head and gave up his spirit. He died on his own terms, in his own time, having said everything he came to say. Resolution and 3 takeaways. So we come back to where we started. If you knew you had only hours to live, what would your last words be? We would probably focus on ourselves, our pain, our fears, our regrets. That's natural, that's human. But Jesus's last words were not about himself. 7 words, and only one was about his own suffering. All the redemption, family, connection with his Father, completion of work, trust. These are not the words of a victim. These are the words of a man who knew exactly who he was, exactly what he'd come to do, and exactly how to do it with grace, love, and dignity. So let me give you 3 things to hold on to. First, forgiveness is strength, not weakness. The strongest person in that scene was not the soldiers with their power. It was the dying man who could have cursed them but chose to forgive them instead. Forgiveness releases you from the power that suffering has over you. It breaks the chain. When you forgive, even when you have every right to hold on to anger, you step into the kind of strength that changes the world. Second, Redemption is available today, not tomorrow. You don't have to wait until you're better. You don't have to prove yourself first. You don't have to earn grace. Like the thief hanging beside Jesus, you can reach out right now, in this very moment, and find that what you're looking for is already there, already offered, already finished. Third, and most important, in your darkest moment, you are not alone. Jesus experienced abandonment. Jesus experienced the feeling of being utterly cut off from God. Jesus experienced the deepest loneliness imaginable, and he came through it, not by denying it, not by pretending it wasn't real, but by trusting his Father even in the dark. So when you're in that place, when you feel alone, when you feel abandoned, when you feel like the darkness will never lift, remember, the one who created the cosmos has been there. The one who loves you more than anything has felt what you're feeling, and he survived it. He conquered it. He rose again, and that means you can too. This is who Jesus was. This is who he is.